computer is rebooting, so we're actually going to be starting the meeting just a couple minutes late. So folks on the line, please hang on. We'll get going in just a minute.
Good evening, and welcome to the Anacortes City Council meeting for June 21st. And Ms. Hunt, could you take the roll, please?
Mr. Carter, Mr. Young,
Here.
Mr. Walters,
Here.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath,
Here.
Ms. Moulton,
Here.
Mr. McDougall,
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on now to item 2, announcements and committee reports. And 2A is my COVID-19 update. And as far as COVID reopenings are here at City Hall, we're open from 9 to 1 Monday through Friday until July 6th. And then we return to normal business hours of 8 to 5 p.m. And the community has been making their way back in the door. So it's been really great to see people here again. In the 98221 zip code, as far as COVID cases, during the total pandemic since March of 2020, we've had between 460 and 469 COVID cases. In Skagit County, as of last Friday, or actually as of today, we've had 32 new cases since a week ago Friday, which brings us to a total of 5,300 positive cases in the county. We've had 75 deaths and 351 people have been hospitalized. The Skagit County is doing pop-up vaccine sites throughout the county, and this week they are doing them on tomorrow, June 22nd, at the Skagit Transit Station at the Skagit Valley YMCA, and on Wednesday at the Skagit Transit Station, and also in Cedar Woolley at the Farmers Market. You can also go to the Skagit County website, and they will continue to post new pop-up sites to reach the community with vaccines. Right now in Skagit County, 1,460,930 vaccinations have been administered, or approximately 65% of the county has received at least one vaccination. Statewide, there have been nearly 7.7 million vaccinations administered, and Governor Inslee states that we're going to be fully reopening on June 30th, or when we hit the 70% of people 16 years and older, whenever that happens first. And as of the 19th statewide, we were at 67.8%. So we're closing in on the 70% mark. So really good news on the COVID site. Another thing I wanted to, it's not COVID, but it's upfront and really important to be communicating with the community. Last Thursday, we put out a press release regarding a national chlorine shortage. And we've had some production plants in the United States, including the one in Longview, Washington, that operationally have not been able to produce the amount of chlorine that we need in all water treatment facilities and many industries. At the time we reported this, we wanted to be proactive and have people start thinking about conservation. You know, as a regional water purveyor, we take this role very seriously, and we didn't want anyone to be caught by surprise. Since last Thursday, we've been in contact and working with our local refineries, both Marathon and Shell, and the local trucking company, LTI, and they're helping us with access to their suppliers and their supply chain. And today we received an additional, we started out with 11 days on hand last week. Today we received an additional 10 days worth of chlorine, and we expect later this week to get almost another, maybe up to 20 days additional delivery. And this is because of our partners in the industries. So we're very thankful to our community members that have stepped up to help us. And this morning, we all met with our EOC staffing, Emergency Operation Center staffing. We had a staff meeting to review our emergency plan, and we're prepared no matter what the outcome. We'd rather be prepared for the worst and expect the best. So right now we're expecting the best, but that's what's going on, and we'll keep the community informed if things change at all. But at this point, it looks like we'll be receiving product, but we will continue to monitor that and communicate as the week moves forward. But I want everyone right now, to just breathe a little sigh of relief. Our water treatment plant manager, Brian Daniel, has done an excellent job of navigating this potential crisis, and we have a plan. So are there any questions?
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young?
No, I just really wanted to commend you and the staff for being proactive, particularly with little notice, and thank the community of people you reached out to make this possible. I think that working together like this just shows how good a community we really are, and the outcomes can be mitigated when people work together. But I want to really thank you and the staff for taking this crisis head on and making it easier for all of us to breathe a little bit more sigh of relief.
Thank you, Anthony. Any other comments? All right, we'll move on then to item 2B, which is our Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee report.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Walters.
The Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee met last week. We met primarily with the Anacortes Family Center and the Anacortes Salvation Army. We also invited Eric Johnson, and there were several other attendees from the community as well that were particularly valuable to the discussion. We were attempting to ascertain exactly what services Skagit Community Action provides in Anacortes, what they could provide, what gaps we are missing as a result of not having a presence from Skagit Community Action in town. And I would say that there are a couple of gaps that may not be worth creating a special office for community action to utilize in Anacortes. It appears that Salvation Army and the Family Center are covering almost all of the bases by themselves. So our discussion there continues, and we'll have more information. We are working on assembling a presentation to council so that we can brief council on where we are in our investigation associated with the budget ordinance from last year that charged us with identifying these gaps and identifying funding sources. However, one thing we think that ought to happen right away and need not wait for some report is modification of our zoning code for conditional use permit requirements for childcare facilities in the R4 zone. And so that is going to be on a future council agenda. I think it is going to be scheduled for next Monday for a public hearing on an interim ordinance that would relieve a childcare facility in the R4 zone of the need to apply for a conditional use permit. With all the licensing and the other permits associated with those facilities, they would still have to go through those processes, but not the conditional use permit process. It's an essential function, and it's essential to getting people back to work post-pandemic. And we are aware of at least 2 facilities that are trying to get permitted right now in the R4 zone. So I think a notification will go out in the Anacortes American this coming Wednesday, and then we'll have a public hearing Monday, and then I think there will be maybe a continuation of that the following Monday with action scheduled after that. So heads up for council on that. I think that's all for now.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Any comments? All right, we'll move on then to item 2C, our Public Works Committee report.
Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. The Public Works Committee met at 5 p.m. today. Mr. Walters and Mr. Young and I were there with staff members from different sub-departments of Public Works. So as usual, we had a lot of fascinating things to talk about. The first being the South Fidalgo water system that we, as a city, may take over from the Skagit PUD. And what's happening right now is they are finalizing a draft for review to come to council. And two of the main goals of this draft and this agreement are to have a seamless transition for the customers, and also to make clear the scope of the PUD projects that need to be completed prior to the city of Anacortes having the transfer of the system and the customers to us. So that'll be coming up soon for us to review. We talked also about the Crayley sensing system, which you are familiar with from prior discussions. It has been identified by the Risk and Resiliency Report to be a great tool to address potential threats to our water system. And that operates with a fiber optic strand that detects leaks in the water pipes and or any physical threats to the perimeter of the system. So there is money that has been asked for, that agreed to in the budget for that. So there is funding there. So that will be coming forward to us as well. We talked about chlorine, which the mayor covered very nicely just a minute ago. And then talk moved on to the 12th and Commercial Roundabout. So design work is going on there with the consultants, and there are various designs being talked about and sizes, and they would require some right-of-way acquisition. So these are beginning discussions about the scope of those and what those will look like. And so that will be coming forward to us too. There are two property owners in effect, Safeway on the east side, and then Leonard Johnson on the west side, who owns those two corners where American Dream Real Estate is and also where Fidalgo Coffee is. So trying to work out how to minimize impacts to the surrounding properties while getting the infrastructure that we need for the city now and going forward. And lastly, we talked about the wastewater influent pump repair. One of the bearing assemblies failed on Memorial Day weekend. It had been only replaced in 2020, so that was a little bit alarming. It's a new system, so we're going back to the old system, which actually was effective for almost 30 years. So we're going back to the old system, and staff did a fantastic job getting down in there because that's where all the inflow comes into the plant. So it wasn't fun job, but they were good sports and did a great job at it. So they got the part, and we're going back to the old system starting tomorrow with the help of Lakeside Industries. It's not super expensive, fortunately. It's $13,000 for the bearing system, and they will also replace the second one. There is redundancy, so there are two, so they'll replace both to be sure that we'll be safe going forward. So they averted disaster. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Carolyn, any other comments? Okay, the next item on our agenda is public comment. And if anyone in the audience would like to talk to the council about anything that's not on the agenda tonight, please raise your hand and we'll give you an opportunity to talk to us. All right, I see no hands raised, so we'll move on to our consent agenda, items A, B, C, and D. I do want to comment on this, just it's my opportunity to talk to the public on item 4C. You'll be considering the street fair application for the 4th of July town photo and parade. So for the community, I just want to point out that on the 4th of July, we will be having a town photo, a 5th Street commercial, a patriotic program at that same site about 10:15, a 5th and commercial. At 11 a.m., the parade will start at 3rd and commercial. And, you know, of course, you line up on O Avenue and come on around. And then at 10:15 or 10:30 p.m., we will have fireworks over Fidalgo Bay. And to date, we have around 39 applications for groups in the parade or floats. So it's filling up. We're really pleased. So that's why I just wanted to get that in why it's on the agenda. So we have our consent agenda items 4A through D.
Mayor,
Mr. Young.
I move we approve the consent agenda for A through D.
Thank you.
Second.
Mr. Young, motion by Mr. Young, a second by Mr. Miller. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we're going to move on now to item 5 under other business. This is open for public comment. This is Resolution 3038, extending the duration of Resolution 2082, providing temporary procedures to respond to the COVID-19 epidemic. And is that Mr. Hoagland? Will you be presenting?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Try and share my screen again. Okay, so this is the original resolution that responded to the COVID-19 pandemic, Resolution 2082. So we are now looking at Resolution 3038. What I'd like to do is just take a second and go through where we're at now. We've made a lot of progress here and addressed a lot of these issues in these extending resolutions. So looking back at Resolution 2082, so this is the original response. So where we're at now, Section 2A, if Council approves Resolution 3038 tonight, 2A would continue to be in effect, and that is, the city's committed to protecting public and staff by minimizing the spread of COVID. Section B, City Hall closed. That would not be continued through this continuing resolution. So that would come to an end on June 30th. Section C came to, both C and D came to an end, were not extended past March 31st, and that resolution referred both of those items to following local and state health department guidelines. Section 3 of council procedures, 3A would continue to be in effect. This would continue to allow council members to attend meetings electronically. Section B, 3B, canceling all council meetings. So that would come to an end June 30th with tonight's resolution. Section C, the public portion, the public comment portion. So that has been addressed, and that was eliminated, not continued as of July 31st of last year. Section 3D continues to be in effect and would continue to be in effect after tonight. Section 4A regarding the hiring freeze, that was discontinued as of December 31st because it was incorporated into the budget ordinance. Section B would continue to be in effect, non-essential equipment suspended, and Section C would continue to be in effect, encouraging expenditure of necessity to continue working from home or decentralized. Section D would come to an end as of June 30th, 2021, and that's the provision that was tracking staff time related to COVID. So the reason for that is we haven't had any additional guidance that type of tracking is going to be necessary. The current ARP funding that's out there available for this latest COVID money does not require that kind of tracking. There's a much higher level of audit test for those. So if there comes a time when we need to re-implement that for tracking individual hours or things of that nature, then we will re-implement, but there does not appear to be a need for that any longer. Section 5 would continue to be in effect, the suspension of the city bag ban, and then Section 6A would continue to be in effect, just regarding the continuing communication of COVID-19. And then Section 6B would not be in effect after this June 30th, the latest resolution. So covered a lot of ground there. I wanted to make sure that council is, kind of familiar and agrees with where we're at here. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Or if we need to go through that again, I'm happy to take as much time as we need to make sure council is agreeable to this.
Here, here.
Mr. Walters and Ms. Moulton.
I definitely would be in favor of rewording the proposed resolution to restate the provisions, the very few provisions that are actually going to continue to be in effect. 2A, 3A regarding meeting electronically. 4C, funding transition to work from home. I don't even know if we need to leave that in effect or not, because it seems to me that the transition to work from home has already occurred and we're sort of back to business as usual in terms of the transactions themselves at this point. I just would like to see us have a discussion about what hybrid meetings are going to look like. I would like to see a proposal, to work through it, to talk through it as a whole council. It could start in the IT committee, but I think it should very quickly get to the full council and that we should have a full council discussion about it. And then do I assume correctly that we would be extending this only so long as is necessary to get the IT, the tech in place? Because June 30th is coming up here where we expect the governor to basically lift all the other restrictions.
That's correct, Ryan. Basically, it's IT making sure that we have the right equipment to do the hybrid.
Okay, and then there's just one other provision here that is notable, and that's the plastic bag ban. That I think has been largely superseded by the state adoption of a plastic bag ban, and I don't see any purpose in us having a separate, different bag ban. The state ban has also been frozen on implementation during the pandemic, so I would just as soon we just follow their lead, and that would mean we would go forward with a repeal by ordinance of our own ban. And that's a whole separate topic. So if we want to continue it for now in this resolution, if we move this forward next week, that's fine with me. But then I think that we should get on with repealing it by ordinance. So we're just in line with the rest of the state and everybody has one set of rules that they can expect to follow.
Hey, Gear.
Yes, Mr. Young.
Yeah, I wanted to direct this to Ryan for clarity. Oh, I'm sorry. Carolyn was next. I saw her hand, so
Yes.
I'll wait.
All right, Caroline, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So just one question, that on the agenda bill cover page, it says this will be extended through December 31st, but on the resolution itself, it says September 30th, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I apologize. That was my error. It was, the resolution is correct. We intended to extend it for 3 months to September.
Great. I mean, that's what we've been doing all along. So thanks, Mr. Hoagland. And then my other question is about the remote meeting requirements. On the item summary on the cover page, it says the existing COVID response provisions, including remote meeting requirements, be extended. But your presentation indicated that won't be the case. We'll be meeting in person. Is that right?
Well, so the intention is to have a hybrid model so that we would start conducting in-person meetings, but there would still be electronic attendance would still be allowed. So
Great. Okay, and so that'll go to the conversation Mr. Walters was talking about, how we do that.
Correct.
Great, thanks.
Because when we found out during all of this that we can get our work done remotely, and we thought it would be really helpful for council and staff to be able to do that. It's just a more efficient way to do business. I mean, of course, you want the council members as much as possible in the council chambers, but there's times you can't be there. So, but you could be remotely. Yeah. So, okay.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Mr. Young.
No, I was going to follow Mr. Walters about the bag ban. So you're basically saying if we repeal our own, we still would be under obligation to follow the state rules. That would be made clear to the public. Is that not correct?
Yes.
I'm noticing your head nod, Ryan. Okay, yes. All right, thank you. That's all I needed to know.
Mayor Gear.
Yes,
Mayor-
Mr. Miller, and then Mr. McDougall.
And if, when we bring it back next week, if you could kind of line out, just give us one that is all lined out rather than going back to see what has been removed or what the plan is, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
And yeah, if it comes out that ultimately, yeah, I think we're ready to show up in person as a council, but the opportunity for the citizens to be able to remotely testify, I think that's a great opportunity to continue forward. And I don't know if we have to do separate resolution for that or not, or if it may be too complicated to try to include that in our current resolution, but I would be very supportive of having the ability for remote testimony from the public.
The public's really enjoyed that. I've been told that several times. Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know that the IT and other departments are working toward that hybrid solution. I think there's even a test planned for later this week, a test of a possible solution. And one of the kind of items or guidance I had given was if we're ready to go back first Monday of July, but the hybrid is not actually ready, I wanted to suggest, would it be okay? Does the council feel okay that we go back in person, even if hybrid's not quite ready until the second week of July, something like that? Just kind of throwing it out there, head nod sort of thing. And then secondly, we are repealing item 3B. So in-person committee meetings are expected to start up again. Do we have intention of doing like hybrid committee meetings as well?
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Walters.
I sure think that we should. I mean, there are some of us that are on about 7 committees, and when a committee occurs in the middle of the day, it would be a lot easier for me to attend it if I can, you connect via Teams instead of having to travel downtown.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so Steve,
I agree.
you have your marching orders for next week?
I think so. Thank you.
Okay. Any other input on that? Okay, we'll bring this back to the council next week for action. So any comments from the public on that? All right, nobody's hands up. So we'll move to the next item, which is item 5B. It's our Access Anacortes Fiber Internet update. This is also open for public comment. Mr. Lundberg, welcome.
Thank you. I am attempting to share my screen. Could somebody please confirm that I've successfully done so?
You have?
Thank you very much. So this is our June update. Emily Shu is away from the office for a few days, hence that is why I'm presenting this evening. I am going to throw it into slideshow format in order to get a little bit more on your screens. Our first part of the report provides a little bit of historical comparison, and then the very bottom line is our current status. And you can see that at present we have slightly over 770 customers and just slightly over $50 of monthly revenue. And I'll keep moving fairly expeditiously, but certainly am ready to answer any questions. I don't mean to move faster than anybody wishes, so please stop me if I move too quickly. This slide simply summarizes on an order basis where we stand. And perhaps the most significant thing to glean from this slide is the fact that within our current service area, we have orders that represent 38% of the market. So in our current service areas, we are just slightly above that goal of 35% market share. And things continue to trend very well. Financial updates. This is actually attempts to state how much cash the fiber division is using. So year to date, the very bottom lower right corner number, the fiber division year to date has consumed approximately $700,000 more than has come in revenue. Let's see, I've got part of the meeting is over. So you can see year to date, the fiber division has generated approximately $200,000 of revenue. Our surface area at present is the area highlighted there. I'm not sure what color it will render on your screen, but it is the highlighted areas. We currently have 111 orders that are in queue to be installed, and that's what our installers are presently doing, is they are currently installing service in these areas. And we keep getting more orders so that we can't knock that queue down under 100, which is actually a very good thing, because the guys continue to install vestigators. I have two slides that talk about the funding opportunities that are in front of the fiber division. The first is the American Recovery Plan Act, which often gets shortened down to the acronym that is pronounced ARPA. Mr. Hoagland referred to this just a little bit earlier. There are funds that are available to the city, and the folks in finance are exercising appropriate due diligence to ensure that any way that we spend these monies, particularly on broadband and the fiber division, fall within the bounds of the rules that the Treasury Department has issued for these funds. The second funding opportunity that we're actively engaged in is a funding opportunity that is administered by the NTIA, which is National Telecommunications and Information Administration. And the particular program is called the Broadband Infrastructure Program. This is part of the federal budget for the federal fiscal year of 2021. There's $288 million that's available nationwide that will be given out in grants. The grants will ideally be somewhere in the range of $5 million to $30 million. So you can do some quick math in your head there, and that means there's probably not a whole lot of grants, maybe one per state, real roughly, maybe less than that. Each grant will require a partnership. One member of the partnership must be a government entity of some sort, and the other member of the partnership must be a fixed broadband service provider. Our original thought was to partner with ourselves for access Anacortes fiber internet, to partner with the city of Anacortes. We learned that that would not be allowed. And so Emily and I got on the phone last week and learned that NOAANET is willing to partner with us. And so we are exploring that partnership with NOAANET. They qualify as the kind of government entity that's needed. So we're exploring that partnership. Applications for this grant program are due in mid-August of 2021. The application itself is fairly straightforward as grants go, definitely much more straightforward and less pages of grant application than was the case with the Economic Development Administration, which we've already know that we will be funded to the tune of about $2.25 million through that. But this grant opportunity is much simpler, much more straightforward as far as the application process goes. The first grants will be announced during the month of November. So if it works out, we would potentially be able to move forward with those funds fairly promptly. At least it appears so at this time. I guess I should always couch my words with a little bit of caution. I've revised this slide just a little bit to indicate primarily, let's see, yeah, my cursor, I've indicated that 2023 and 2024 expansions hopefully would be covered in part by the NTI grant application that I just discussed. Then we've got several slides that just summarize our current service area so that all can remain aware of the order in which we anticipate our expansion occurring. The next order, where our contractor is currently deploying the backbone, is out on the west portion of town. It can generally be described as those areas that are west of Anacortes Mine Road in very general terms. Following that, we anticipate that we will use the $2.25 million, excuse me, from the Economic Development Administration to fill in the highlighted areas that's back on the east part of town. Then we work our way back into the middle and finish that off, as well as the strip of town that I guess you could say basically follows Highway 20 eastward. And so that's the order in which we anticipate seeing the network expand and taking fiber to the good people of Anacortes. We do have a number of what we call special projects or opportunities that involve our fiber network, but are not precisely the same part of the network as I've just been talking about. So for instance, we are actually in the process of extending fiber to this senior activity center. And so we look forward to enabling the senior center to be on the city's network for the enterprise network. And that will replace current connectivity that is achieved by wireless technology at present. We've received 2 different inquiries from Rock Island Communications. One is a dark fiber lease from Anacortes all the way over to Mount Vernon. And the second is a dark fiber lease that's entirely within Anacortes. We've received an inquiry from Wave for a dark fiber from basically the greater Anacortes area to the water treatment plant. We anticipate being able to turn up service to Western Washington University, dedicated internet access to serve the Shannon Point Marine Center. And that should be happening, actually, it has the potential to happen fairly soon because we are already, our contractor is working to deploy backbone infrastructure in the part of the city that is needed in order to then continue fiber all the way up to Shannon Point. And then lastly, in this slide, we have Island Hospital. They are in the process of doing some renovation work on a building on Commercial Avenue, South Commercial Avenue. That was the former site of the Napa Auto Parts store. The hospital is taking that over and has asked us to be prepared to serve it with dark fiber, and that will happen a little bit later this year. Our coming activities, the EDA grant application continues to be processed, and we are seeing slight progress there. We are, and a very great thank you to Darcy Swetnam and to her staff, as well as to Mr. Buckenmeyer. We are working on easements in the west part of the city. There are quite a number of privately owned roads and streets out there that just never became city streets. And so there are quite a number of easements that the city needs to obtain out that way. And the folks I've mentioned have just absolutely been wonderful and extremely helpful. They've been really doing a large, great amount of work. We are seeking the ARPA grant funding in cooperation with the rest of the city. We're exploring that partnership with NOAANET for the NTIA grant opportunity. And then we're following various bits and pieces of legislation that pop up from time to time, proposing to provide further funding for broadband infrastructure. And then I believe this is our last slide that we always just throw up just to, especially because there are members of the public that are viewing things along with us. And so we like to end with this slide that just summarizes our service plans that are available. And again, very, very happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Walters.
I think this slide is a good idea, but the slide a lot of the city wants to see is the map of when they're getting service.
Yes.
So I think it's worth pointing out that we are accelerating that to the best we can, especially by adding additional crews to do those installations.
That's correct.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Mr. McDougall.
Thank you for the report, Mr. Lindberg. Can I ask for the ARPA funding that we're in pursuit of, or at least in discussions of, do you have guidance as to like what sort of dollar figure we're asking for, or what we might expect? Would it cover, say, the 4.5 million line of credit for the west side? Would it potentially cover more?
I know Mr. Hoagland isn't on, but right now we've been allocated. Oh, Steve, can you answer that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's a little bit complicated. It's a simple question, a bit of a complicated answer. So we were designated as an entitlement city because of our HUD allocation. And because of that, our ARP allocation amount is significantly lower than other comparable cities. So we have, I've emailed Department of Treasury and also reached out to HUD to try and get a review of our allocation in hopes of getting that increase to be more in line with what our comparable cities are at. But what our allocation is at now, we've been allocated 2.89 million, and that's scheduled to arrive in two tranches, one in 2021, one in 2022, and then I believe it's either a 3 or 4 year window to spend that money. And there's, a variety of things that are eligible for that, but expanding a broadband network is one of those items. And there are some criteria associated with that. We spoke with Mr. Lindberg about this over the last couple of days. Like, it has to be an underserved or a not served area. And have less than certain amounts. And Mr. Lindberg has verified that those areas would meet that criteria, so those ARP funds would be eligible for use on that broadband project, on our broadband project.
Got it. So as of now, assuming nothing changes from an allocation standpoint, we would be able to allocate some percentage of that. Sounds like roughly $2.9 million.
Yeah, roughly 2.9. And yeah, we've talked a little bit about that internally, and that project makes a lot of sense to.
Okay. And we haven't worked out the final percentages of what goes to which projects, though, because obviously there are a bunch of other things eligible for that funding.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, thank you.
The other thing I would add, and what Steve's pursuing, cities our size are getting a little over 4.5 million. So if we can be successful in getting our number of allocation done correctly, we would have even more to put towards fiber. So the team's working, the finance team is working on it. Okay.
Just a quick question, Mayor Garrett. I know that we've had our illustrious senator and representatives have been all about in the area. So I'm sure you've been their ear, and their earlobes are pretty big right about now from the pulling of them.
Yeah, we've talked to our federal representatives.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments on this? All right, anybody from the audience who wants to comment? Access Anacortes. Okay, so the next item on the agenda tonight is item 5C. It's the Thompson Train Static Display Plan. This is open for public comment. And Council, you asked me months ago to bring to you a plan on how we would take care of the Tommy Thompson train and abide by our 2012 agreement with the Thompson family. Staff and I have put together a plan. Originally, when we last talked, we thought we had some community partners to help us financially, and they, for several reasons, have not been able to be part of this. So it now looks like it would just be a city plan. And so Darcy will do the presentation tonight. And then if there's any members of the audience that want to talk to us, I think I'll allow them in, and then we'll bring it back to a full council discussion. This is something we can discuss tonight with possible action, or we can come back in a week or two and make a final decision. All right, so Ms. Sweatman, thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Can you confirm that you all can hear me okay?
Hear you.
Okay, good. I was having some technology issues a little bit ago. So I'll make my portion of the discussion here pretty brief, so you all can have your discussion about this. Can you see the slide up on the screen that I've shared?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So as the mayor said, this is bringing back the plan that council tasked the mayor's office with presenting. And so just to recap the history, the family of Tommy Thompson donated the train and the accompanying shed with the request that the city use the train to develop a static display that's open to the public. The train and shed are both located on the city's depot property, and they're not currently open for public viewing. And so originally council had asked the mayor to work with the Anacortes Railway Group to fund and help staff the static display. And they notified the city by letter on April 30th, 2021, that they were not interested in moving forward with the city in the direction that the plan was going. And so now the mayor has come back with a plan and is asking for some budget allocations to accomplish the goals of the plan. So the development of the static display will require renovation of the shed and the train. It will require ongoing train and shed maintenance, and there will be some operational plans that will have to get put into place for the display implementation. So just a brief overview, train ownership and management. The train was donated by Ann Thompson in June of 2012. Prior to that, the train shed had been donated to the city, and there were other donations of equipment, while a lot of the equipment was actually donated with the train itself. So moving forward, the plan is that those assets will remain city property and that the static display would be managed by the city's museum department. So we broke down the static display work into 3 different categories. There's the shed and train renovation, there's ongoing train and shed maintenance, and then there's the exhibit operational planning. So for the train and shed renovation, the shed itself is, and this was more fleshed out in the plan that's in your packet, but it needs to be connected to power to maintain climate control and lights, those things that are necessary to have the facility be open to the public and protect it from the elements. The shed needs work to install and repair the foundation so that it's safe. It needs the installation of both insulation and windows, which will again protect the train from the elements and allow the public to view the train. There will be some improvements that will have to happen to bring the building to code. For example, it's currently, would need some work to make it ADA accessible for the public. And there would be certainly some work to interpret the Thompson family legacy and incorporate that story into the display. So that work would have to be done by a competitively bid contract, which would be a public works contract through the city. Now the train has been in the shed since 2012, and there has been some work that's been done over the years to maintain it. And so I think the next step would be that the city would contract with a steam engine expert for restoration work and for ongoing maintenance needs. We understand that, you know, for example, there may be some rust on the engine now that needs to be cleaned. It may be required to be fired up in order to keep some of the equipment functioning properly. So that all would be done under the supervision of a steam engine expert who knew how to do those things safely and properly. And then ongoing cleaning and preservation. So for operational planning for the exhibit itself, there would need to be the development of set hours for the display, and that would be consistent hours that were posted so folks could know when to come in. And one of the, you know, we've got a couple of museum facilities that could be good models for that. For example, the Maritime Heritage Center and the W.T. Preston exhibits, which are not open, you know, all the time, but open during times when the public is more likely to be interested in visiting them. So the next part is staffing, and the mayor worked with Brett Lunsford, the director of the museum department, to talk about what would be required from a staffing standpoint to essentially stand up another museum. And they determined that it would require a 0.7 FTE employee. And this would be the case, as I understand it, even if there were community volunteers who were interested in helping staff the exhibit. But just the work required to curate the exhibit, manage the contracts, make sure that all the maintenance is happening properly, and ensure that volunteers and staff are properly coordinated to make the exhibit open to the public. And then there would be some, hopefully, community volunteers and other staff in the city supporting that work. So there would be some ongoing maintenance needs for the train and shed. You know, the train itself, again, with the help of the steam engine expert that the city would contract with, there would be some annual cleaning and maintenance to carry out. And at this point, we're not entirely sure exactly what that is, but that would be something that contracted expert would be able to advise the city on. And then the shed itself the CFP would need to be updated to reflect this new project, and the shed would require regular inspection and periodic maintenance as needed, just like any of our other city facilities. So the budget allocation for this project, we started looking at budget year 2021, what would need to happen in order to get the shed to a place where it could be open for public display. Mr. Meismer worked with a contractor in the community and got an estimate of between 100 and 115,000. One caveat there is that since that figure was generated, construction costs have gone up. I think the price of lumber has gone up quite a bit. So that's a plug-in, but the actual cost could be more than that. We estimated around $25,000 to engage a steam engine expert and do some initial renovations to get the train back to a condition where it could be open to the public. There could be some additional train restoration costs that we're just not able to anticipate without the expertise of that contractor. So the total for budget year 2021 would be $140,000. But moving forward, obviously that renovation work would be completed. So we would be looking at, we guessed $10,000 a year based on Mr. Lunsford's estimate of what it might cost to have a steam engine expert help oversee, you know, if the train needs to be steamed up, if there are other ongoing maintenance items that need to happen. Annual train maintenance, we just plugged in a figure of 15,000. Again, that was an estimate. Train shed maintenance, another estimate of around $10,000. And then the staffing cost in today's dollars for the 0.7 FTE is 52,000. So that was the best guess of what a year would be to oversee this project and keep it staffed and keep the various components maintained and up to date. And then that would be, you know, obviously an ongoing expense each year. The you know, numbers would be reflected for adjustments, CPI adjustments, etc. So the next steps to move forward with this project, first of all, the mayor is asking council to allocate approximately $140,000 from the 2021 budget for the train shed improvements and a steam engine experts. There may be additional costs that are unknown for restoration of the train, but we would be able to assess that with the help of the steam engine expert. So we touched bases with Mr. Hoagland in the finance department, and he, made it clear that the allocations in the 2021 budget are not there yet. And so it would require cutting something that's currently in the budget to make room for those improvements this year. And then it would also involve allocating roughly $87,000 plus some additional costs for the train restoration for budget year 2022. And that would cover that 0.7 FTE to manage the facility and the exhibit. So in terms of the legal steps that would happen to carry this plan out, we would be starting with a contract to improve the train shed. And as we said, that would be competitively bid, but we do have what we think we could use as an estimate, and that's that $115,000. The specifications for how the train would be improved could be developed by the city with the help of community stakeholders. And then that contract, because of the dollar figure, would come before council for approval. Separately, we would be looking at a contract with a steam engine expert to identify how to best restore and maintain and care for the train. And the city will have to go through the process of ensuring that, what updates to the shed are in compliance with community visions for what the display would look like. And then, as I mentioned before, we would need to make sure that the CFP is updated to incorporate the new project and the improvements to the train shed. So mayor would take those things then and coordinate with staff to operationalize the static display, including coordination with community partners. And I believe those are the components of the plan. And I'm not necessarily the subject matter expert in the room, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I believe Mr. Lunsford is on the call as well. And I will leave it at that.
I want to add one thing on the budget. Steve, I spoke to Steve Hoagland today, and we agreed that the first step, if the council likes this plan, the first step would be to bring this to the finance committee. And the finance committee, along with Steve, would look at how we would fund this from this year's budget. So, and then we bring it to the council as a whole. So, okay. So any questions for Darcy or Brett or thoughts?
Mayor, this is Anthony Young.
Yes.
There was a letter submitted by the train group.
Yeah.
Is that going, and I think they requested that it be read. And just, my sentiment on this is that initially, I really would like it to go before the finance committee before we make a final decision. But I do understand that this process has been, at least from my own perspective, arduous, cumbersome, and in some cases problematic. I know everybody was trying to work out the best solution that helps everybody. The city recognizes the family and the tribute to Mr. Thompson, but also at the same time, the fact that the community here and the local train group was giving their heart and soul to trying to make it happen. I think the challenge, though, where it fell apart, to my knowledge, is that in the process of discussing with the city, the train group felt that this was just belabored for so long, and that I think in my conversation with yourself, Mayor, you were indicating that you were waiting for them to give a response to the proposal because it's a negotiation. And I totally understand that. And so it was to my surprise also that they withdrew, but I think that they withdrew not because they didn't want the train, have the experts to do much of what we are requiring, have the volunteer base. What they withdrew because they believed that the process was not going to end up in any type of agreement. Just simply, they didn't feel that they were being valued in their time and their effort. And I understand that that takes two sides of it. So I wanted to bring that forward and just to say that given the withdrawal, I'm supportive of us trying to find out if we can afford it and see if we can move forward. My position has changed just a little bit because of their withdrawal, but I do believe that if we look at what it could, if we have the budget for it and what we have the budget for, I would be amenable to that. I still think it's an heirloom and a historic piece the city would hate to lose, but without stakeholders and supporters, I do think we need to evaluate where we are and how we get there. I'm hoping we can find a way.
Thank you, Anthony. Any other comments before I open up to the audience? Okay,
Mayor Gear?
yes, Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. I think it's an issue of, well, one of the issues is of prioritization, what's important to us in our budget. So I would be very curious to see where we feel that we could cut existing budget items to provide funding for the train. And I'm also thinking ahead to things like our ladder truck and our fire station and the gaps that we are identifying in social services in our community that are very real and what we are going to plan to do about those. So I understand it's obviously a very complex subject, but when I feel that we have very pressing capital needs already, as well as human social needs and staffing needs that exist already, that we want to be very careful about pursuing essentially what is essentially an additional museum to one that we already have. So I am leaning, as I have been, strongly toward returning the train to the family, and I will take, that hasn't really changed for me, but I appreciate that there are 6 other people on council that have opinions also. Thank you.
Mayor here.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I was going to wait until you're the public and then us, but I'll go ahead and go now since most
public
council has weighed in significantly. Look, Mayor, I thank you and Ms. Sweatnam and the museum staff for a lot of effort to come up with this plan, because I think no matter what point of view we come at this project, we're all trying to do the right thing for the citizens of Anacortes and the legacy of the Tommy Thompson train. But as you recall, rest of council recall, my position was this was at no city funds because we had a nonprofit group that was willing to work with the city. But at this point, this is not to be negative, and it's not necessarily the fault of the staff, but I'm surrendering to the bureaucracy because this is not a plan that we can afford. And I don't have confidence that the same staff that allowed $50,000 that was allocated by the Museum Foundation for the Tommy Thompson train and allowed that allocation to go back to the general fund, it does not portend well to the future success, and probably not even at $300,000. My recommendation is full historic photo documentation of this, suitable for future museum display, maybe hold on to a few key pieces, and then look at the possibility of this as it is an asset of the city. So we still have to look at some of the legal responsibilities that we have. But kind of that's my position has never changed from this had to be worked with a nonprofit partner working either with the Museum Foundation or the city, and we just couldn't get there. And I would encourage the rest of council to read the letter from the Anacortes Railway Group that explains some of the issues, but I think we're believe that the city could do it. Again, after all these years, I don't think the right answer is to throw money at this problem to finally get us to do the right thing and display it completely to the satisfaction of the stakeholders here. So I guess that's really all I have to say on the subject.
Mayor
Mr. Walters.
I don't think that we are able to find the money that it would would be required to build this building and operate this facility in the budget without affecting other priorities. I mean, we just heard about the fiber infrastructure that we're building, that we're on ongoing basis searching for money for. We're currently funding through a loan that could go to anything, and general fund dollars. We've got the fire truck, we've got the fire station, we have all these other capital needs. There is no finding the money in the budget without making that trade-off with other things. So like Mr. Miller, like Ms. Moulton, I don't see how we can really justify spending those dollars on this facility. I do think that there's a possibility that we could move forward, though, with this facility. There are service clubs, there are private groups, there are simply private donors that might be interested in it. And I think that we ought to separate the question of what it is we want to do from how it is we want to fund it. And if we would like to retain the train and build out this facility sort of as described, although I think it's worth talking about the details of that, then we should put it out to the community and see if they are willing to fund it. I think it's only Ms. McGrath and I here on council that were actually here for the operation of the train in town. And I think that there are a lot of people in town that remember it and would be willing to fund it. But if there aren't enough, then maybe we shouldn't pursue it that way. So I would be in favor of some more discussion about really what this looks like on the ground, and then putting it out to the community to see if they will fund it. And with respect to what it looks like on the ground, I think we're not talking just about the building, but also about the ongoing staffing costs associated with it. I certainly appreciate the request for more staff to make this work, because it really can't be done with zero staff. But I wonder what hours would it be open? What level of involvement would staff have? Would it be manned by volunteer docents, or would it be staff that open the building? All that level of detail on really how that would work, I think would be really valuable, not just for council, but also for any prospective donors who might want to pursue this.
Mayor, go right ahead.
Go ahead, Carolyn, and then
Thanks. To Mr. Walters' point about funding, maybe I'm not sure of the history of attempts to get funding for this, but Mr. Lunsford, could you speak a bit about previous efforts to fund either a static display or ongoing operation of the train? Could you give some history?
Well, in short, I would say that it's hard to compete in fundraising for a static display when the idea of an operational train is being proposed, and that the questions of feasibility of an operational train have always been something that is yet to be worked out. And so there's scenarios in which a static display could be done and invested in a location that might evolve to then also house an operational train. But those things were a basic conflict in the approach that the former director was dealing with as well. So that's why, in a sense, the museum's goal of developing that static display was deferred to some of the operational goals that were being proposed in the community between 2015 to 2018, and then again recently. But I guess to answer just quickly the question in brief, the fundraising from the community for static display of the train was minimal from 2012 forward, and the $50,000 referenced earlier was for a museum foundation funds that were already raised through donations to the museum that were earmarked for a specific type of pole building. And when that specific type of pole building was no longer in play, then it made sense to return those funds to the general fund with a willingness, should another feasible plan come forward, to make those funds available And that's just, so the Museum Foundation has always stood at the ready to work toward a feasible plan, but, and I think they would again. And so, but as that's been the main issue from my perspective, is that the idea of developing, you know, putting money into the train shed was always thought of as, well, why should we be putting money there from the operational enthusiast standpoint if we could put that money into a new location over at 4th Street and running across the wetlands, or a new train by the Preston and running up to the Tommy Thompson Trail, or a new train station at the skate park and running it down. So those kinds of plans for a operational train station were in a sense in competition for simply doing the low-hanging fruit of fixing up the train shed.
Thank you. Mr. Young.
Yes, no, I just wanted to elaborate on that. To my knowledge, I think as Mr. Lunsford indicated, there was $50,000, I do believe, for at least 2 years budgeted toward the train or the train shed. But that money was never used because there wasn't a plan to come forward. And I understand there were thoughts and discussions, but none of that really came to fruition. What ended up happening, I do believe, is that the local train group was talking about a static display, but then it seemed that the family was interested in having the train run. And so therefore, the train group recalculated what that would be like and tried to bring that forward. And all of those things associated with having the experts, what it would look like, how it would get there, all of those things were in-house, and they had the capability of raising the money. I'm not going to lament that, as I have vigorously defended the idea of the train being here, as I heard the constituents say to me that's what they wanted. So what I am saying, though, that given where we are right now, and hearing Mr. Walters and also appreciating what Mr. Miller said, and also, of course, Ms. Moulton, I do think that if we are to go forward, I do and would like for us to consider, what it could look like, what could we budget for, whether all a part, or as Mr. Miller said, parts of the train being here and in display would be something I would be amenable to. I regret that the train group backed away out of frustration, but it is where we are right now, and I think and recognize the city's budgetary restraints. And so I am open to how do we move forward and just sort of honor the history and legacy of what we've had here in Anacortes. It was a beautiful run.
Mayor Gear,
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
I would really appreciate hearing from the public before we continue to.
Yeah, thank you. We will do that. Okay, at this time, anyone in the audience would like to speak to the council? Please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Okay, I have Lisa Carney, and then after that, Tam Guffey. So Lisa, your microphone is off. Turn your microphone on. There you go. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So I would like to just make a comment that there was a comment to say that at some point along the way, the Thompson family wanted the train to run. I think it's critically important to say wherever that message came from or continued to be perpetrated, there was no time that the Thompson family wished to have the train built by the father and the husband to be run through Anacortes. So just as again, the spinning that always says the group that wants it to operate takes on a life of its own, we have to say, stop. There was never a plan that it would operate. It's critical to get that out of the conversation. A second piece that is apparent to all, there is no pain-free way out of this situation. If we think enough, today is exactly 9 years from the day Ms. Thompson signed this document. If for 9 years, conversation and conversation and conversation has got to no progress, maybe it's worth reflecting that a different path should be brought. The idea that further discussion of the same thing that's been discussed will get us to a new spot. It's not really a rational path. A second or a third point here is, no matter what decision is made, people are going to be impacted. If dollars are put to the train, I think Mr. Walters just said, money will be taken from elsewhere. And if money is not put to the train because it's somewhere else, it means dollars are put to people in Anacortes. So there is just thinking that by more discussion we'll get to some place where everyone feels cozy about it just cannot be the goal. We have proof of the time for which no progress has been made. And I would like to encourage the family, encourage the council to make a decision in the best interest of the city of Anacortes and the people. And thinking if they've already invested, the council's, your time matters. Members of council, your time matters. You have been talking about this for a very, very, very long time, and your wisdom and expertise could be applied to different topics, different needs. And there is a cost to leaving the matter unresolved. So again, my advocacy is that the train go back to the family because there's clarity about them having it and the Anacortes being free of any more time devoted to what should we do. Thank you so much for your time.
Mayor Garrett, I need to correct.
Excuse me, Mr. Young. Thank you, Ms. Carney.
I need to correct something that Ms. Carney said that inferred something that I did not say. And so before we lose the point, I think it's important that I make this statement. And that is, at no time did I say that the family wanted the train to run in Anacortes. From the documents that we were receiving from the family, it was an indication that they had changed their mind in supporting of the train moving to California to run. That was what I said. I never at one time indicated that the family wanted the train to run in Anacortes. And I think if I understood you correctly, that's what you alluded to. And I wanted to point out that that was in error.
Thank you. All right. Other members of the audience? Okay, Tammy Guppy, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Okay, so I just want to thank Mrs. Carney for her comments and also the city council for all they've done. And I've been in this town about 2 years, and I feel the legacy of Tommy Thompson is a special one. And this conversation that has been dragged on and on is making a bad feeling. I've talked to many members of the community, and I hope more will get on and speak tonight, but I lean towards giving it back to the family and moving on, agreeing with Ms. Moulton that we have several civil service issues that need to be addressed. And especially with the train group pulling out, I feel that this is a good time to let this issue drop and keep the good feelings of Tommy Thompson himself. Thank you, Mrs. Mayor.
Thanks, Ms. Guppy. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to speak to us tonight in the audience? Okay. All right, council, it's back to you.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Ms. McGrath.
Yeah, thank you. So I really wanted to hear what the public had to say
and the number of folks that would come out and discuss the importance of the train, because we've heard a lot, on various platforms, in letters, in conversation on the street when we get pulled aside by people. But I think it is really kind of crystallized the fact that this proposal has come forward. And I want to thank you and Ms. Swetnam and Mr. Lunsford for putting the time and effort to figure out a reasonable, kind of responsible way to honor the train and take care of the train, but also within a scope that makes sense for the city. I also want to say that I think Tommy Thompson was a very unique character. He created a very special experience for kids like myself and my cousin and my, Sunday afternoons. Riding that train was a really special thing. The fact that he had the tenacity and the skill set and the drive and the partnerships within the community that were willing to volunteer and have that train actually constructed with train tracks and run for as many years as it did is really, really incredible and a really important part of our community. And it's part of the reason why the Tommy Thompson Trail has that name, right? Because that was a way to honor his legacy in a kind of a forward motion when we look for the next 10, 20, 50 years, right? Where we can enjoy and have fond memories of that. But unfortunately, when the train was given to us, right, or when that agreement was made, I think it was made in good faith on both sides. And over the last number of years, there have been extensive conversations. There's been a lot of daydreaming. There's been a lot of, drawings and discussions and presentations to community organizations over the years by folks who have knowledge and passion and appreciation for the train and would like to see something happen with it moving forward. Unfortunately, though, nothing has come to fruition. And I don't think, not only do I not think, I truly believe that it is, has been discussed extensively and staff hours have been spent working with the public, working with individuals, working with various groups to try to have some kind of this dream and honor, whether it in whatever capacity that train would be the next kind of reimagination of how that train would interact with the public. I have full faith that, both individuals and city staff were working with the best of intentions. The challenge is when rubber meets the road, right? And what Tommy Thompson did really well is he never stopped pushing, and he built a train, a community train, and had train tracks in a time where there was a little bit less regulation than we have now. And so that it fit in the community at that time. But now we're in a place where, Tommy Thompson retired the train for a reason, because he didn't feel that there was anyone who could run it. And that's been documented, right? And when it went to the steam plant in Seattle, that was part of it. When it came back here, it was to be a static display. And when I looked at the proposal by staff and by Mayor Gear, I thought it was fairly reasonable and fairly realistic, maybe a little kind of gray about how much work would need to go in the next year to kind of get it back up to an appropriate condition. But the 140,000 or even 200,000, that's a number I could work with if it was determined that it should be part of the capital facilities plan, and that would be a process. The part that I can't wrap my head around is the ongoing expense of $87,000 for this one display. And that's because, we're all on a variety of committees, and we all see the requests by department heads of what we're kind of lacking. But I'm also on the personnel committee, and we keep talking about the costs of salary and increases and our, filling vacant positions and the cost of living in Anacortes. And so $87,000, if you kind of spread that out for recruitment for important staff positions, while it is not exciting or, you know, brings this warm fuzzy feeling, it's the reality that we need to focus on as a city. So if I was hoping that there would be more kind of public support for volunteers or fundraising or whatnot on this call tonight, and because there isn't, and because I haven't really heard from any folks at this point since this proposal by city staff has come forward, at this point, I'm inclined to, you know, unfortunately say thank you for the proposal. But if we are not ready to honor that 2012 commitment with the family, and the family is still in a position where they would like to take back ownership of the train, I think that's probably the direction in which we need to move.
Thank you.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. McDougall.
I've been quiet to this point, but basically, and I don't have a lot at this point, I thought Ms. Cleland McGrath stated things very well. And others on council have also made the same point, that we don't currently have room in the budget. We would have to make some sacrifice. I don't know that, you know, everything is really tight across the board. So I don't know that we have a place where we could make a sacrifice that that anybody's going to be really happy with. So I do want to thank yourself and staff, particularly Ms. Swetnam and Mr. Lunsford, for putting this proposal together. Really appreciate the work and the effort that went into that. And yeah, and at this point, I think, you know, agreeing with other members on council who have said we just don't have the funds to go forward with this. That's where I'm at as well.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. I mean, this saddens me tonight. I see the reality of it. I think of Mr. Thompson, and he was a one man. He devoted his life to this, and we haven't had anyone quite like that since Tommy retired the train and since it was returned to the city. And I was hoping that the community would step forward and support us in a financial way, because it truly was a priority for the community as a whole. Over the last 9 years, I think it would have come together. So, I mean, I respect what you're all saying tonight, but I see the reality of it. And so I'll be quiet at this point. So, further discussion.
Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton, and then who else spoke? Is it
Mr. Walters can go first.
Okay, Ryan, and then Carolyn. Go ahead.
Oh no, please, Carolyn, go ahead.
Okay, well, I am wondering if this, on our agenda, it says discussion possible action. So I'm wondering if this is an appropriate time for action.
Yeah, it could be, because we stated we could do that.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Walters.
The only thing additional I'd say there is that I think all of Ms. Cleland McGrath's points were very well taken, especially the trade-offs involved. If you look at the budget, you could find money, but what you don't see in the budget are the unfunded liabilities, the projects we haven't taken on that we really do need to take on. So the only thing I'd quibble with is maybe we don't see people in the audience tonight saying that they would step forward to do this work because we haven't specifically asked them. If we did lead with a proposal, which I think wouldn't necessarily need to be more detailed than the one before us, which would mean more staff work to put more detail into it. You know, for instance, a rendering of what the train shed looks like, maybe additional vetting of what that design is like. I don't know how much money we want to commit to just simply finding out if the community is willing to fund the construction of that facility. And I don't know at what level we need to have a conversation about those ongoing expenses, because maybe those are deal breakers, as various council members have mentioned, all by themselves. I just don't want us to have the takeaway that the community is not willing to put money and time into this if we haven't specifically asked them to.
So should we ask them and give them a couple of weeks to see if a miracle happens?
Mayor, the one other thing I'd say there is that I'm not 100% sure that the $115,000 is sufficient for renovation of the shed. I went down and took a look at it. It sure seems to me like we'd be basically building a new building and putting the shed around it. It needs foundation, it needs weatherization, it needs a floor, it needs a ceiling, it needs power. Fortunately, I think it doesn't need sewer, but it needs almost everything else. It needs to be protected from rodents. It needs so much. So I don't know what the basis is for the estimate, whether it's a detailed estimate or just a dartboard. But if we were to pursue this path of asking the community, I would hope that we have the right number before we go out to ask them.
It was a contractor's number, that the same contractor that worked with the volunteer group. And that, but the only thing that wasn't correct is that was before the lumber prices went up. So he did take into account all the things you're talking about. So,
Well, and they're starting to come back down, so maybe that would even out.
So yeah, it wasn't just, we didn't just pick a number out of the sky.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young.
No, and I hear all of the sentiment of all of my fellow council members, and I appreciate it. I think that my sentiment on this has been very clear from the beginning, and I don't think it's a surprise that I continue to support it, but I do hear that, where we are as a city and what we're trying to do. I think it could be a tourist attraction. I do, but we've got to look and see if we have the budget. And to Mr. Walters' point, I'm in agreement that if we ask the public, whatever outcome we determine as a council that is, I will support it. That's what I can tell you. So whatever, I would like for us to do that. But again, I'm one of 7 votes. Thank you.
Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton.
We have had 2 very passionately engaged and involved groups over the last 10 years. We had the Anacortes Railway group in the mid-2010s, and then we had this last group that backed out. My thought is that if neither of those 2 groups had the wherewithal and the bandwidth to follow through, again, that was not for the static display. I guess we need to give it a chance, but what if we did something like, Mr. Lunsford, did you have something you wanted? He looked like he wanted to say something. No, okay, sorry. My inclination is to just take a vote right now to do something like decide we could work with the family to honor and preserve the legacy of Tommy Thompson and the train here in town, with the agreement that we would return the train to the family. Or we could do that into, we've just been kicking this down the road for so long.
I agree with the kicking it down the road, but I also think since it's such a big decision, and this is your first time hearing financially what it costs, that it wouldn't hurt to wait 2 weeks to give the public a chance. Maybe we'll get a miracle donor or something, and then take a vote in 2 weeks. It'll be in the paper. It'll give the community, because we've always waited till the second meeting on any big. And I know it's been 9 years and things, but this would be the second. This is only the first time you've heard the specifics of this proposal. So if we waited to our second meeting and just put it on to take a vote, and that gives the community an opportunity, one last opportunity to step up. And that's been our practice on important issues.
Mayor Gear.
Ms. Cleo McGrath.
Yeah, I'm inclined to give it 2 weeks or wherever it makes sense 2 to 3 weeks, wherever it makes sense on the schedule, to allow for, you know, any kind of community members or groups that may want to come forward, give them a little time so that they can have realistic discussions amongst themselves. But the other thing that I'd be kind of curious to hear from, or at least kind of request some feedback from, would be from the Anacortes Museum Foundation, since they're involved with the Preston and the Maritime Heritage Center and whatnot, to see if they're in support of it, or if they have any thoughts on this specific project. I think that's why they are on that committee, or the foundation board. So I think that it would be helpful for us as council members to have their thoughts on it too.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I'd just like to second what Ms. Cleland was saying about that, because I think that's a piece we're missing. We're kind of almost trying to get to a vote of, are we going with a static display plan as present, or are we giving the train back, which I think we have some legal work to do on that side, as it is a city, our last legal determination, it is a city-owned asset. And so we have to go through a process, plus all the pieces and parts that the city actually purchased as well. So there's a lot of work there. But a really important aspect of that is maybe with the Museum Foundation, again, maybe this is work for you, Mr. Lunsford, but you know, what I'm talking about is, rather than think static display, the other option is a historic documentation. We did a lot of this kind of stuff at a base that I worked at that was built in World War II. You document it, you put key pieces of that, and you might have room in the Maritime Heritage Center over to the side for 1 or 2 display items. So again, or at the museum. So I think it would help us council get past this kind of painful decision that there is a way that we will document and maintain that legacy in Anacortes, no matter what happens to most of the train.
I think those are all really reasonable. Yes, Mr. Walters.
And I really feel confident that construed appropriately, we could raise the money for the building, but that leaves open the question of the ongoing $87,000 put together here in this proposal, which quickly eclipses the cost of the building. So by making that suggestion, I don't want to mislead the community into thinking that if we had $140,000 for the building and the initial startup costs here, that we have enough money to really keep this going as a going concern. And I don't want the community to be misled there. So we need to have more discussion in that direction if we are going to take that approach. I don't know how low that ongoing cost can get, but I think 87,000, as Ms. McGrath pointed out, is too high, given our competing needs and our competing obligations.
But I think it's a real number. So yeah, it might be too high for our budget, but I think it's real in the sense of to do it correctly. Okay, so we'll bring it back, and Darcy will be gone for a little bit. In about 3 weeks, we can bring it back for continued discussion. I mean, to hear from the public, and then the council will take action. Ms. Carney, did you just put your hand up again? Mr. Carney, did you need to speak?
If I could?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. In the discussion of, in the months since October that I have been a part of this, there was lengthy discussion about the public who cared so deeply, and they wrote letters and they wrote emails, and different council members had personal experience with the public, telling them how much this train meant to them. And there's no reason to think that wasn't true. Memories are amazing things. In the discussion, or as you contemplate the going forward in 2 and 3 weeks, or what might happen next, it maybe would be helpful to say, what would it look like to read what it means that the public is engaged? And does it mean, 5 people write a check for $10,000? Does it mean we've got 10 letters and 50 emails of people saying, we sure like the train? Right. That if the goal is to then wait some more time to get additional information to be able to make this decision, that we get some clarity about what does it look like when the public cares. That's what I would ask, if the council would give some thought to having parameters to know what the feedback, how the feedback will give council ability to make their decision. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Carney. I believe part of why we're doing this is just so that the public isn't surprised that we took action tonight, because I don't think it's on much of the public's radar at the moment. So just in fairness to the way we do business here in the city of Anacortes, we like to let people know when we're taking action. And then as far as her question to you, council, you know, I think that's something for us to consider. They're going to step up with a lot of money, a plan, what it would take to change our minds one way or the other. So, okay, so we'll bring this back in 3 weeks, and good discussion. I think we're getting close. Thank you all. Thank you, Ms. Swetnam, for your work and helping me, and Brett, your work on this, and council, your year of work on this, this last round. Okay, so at this time, we're going to move on to item 5D, which is Resolution 3039, authorizing the purchase of a storage box for emergency safety equipment containment and waiving the competitive bidding requirement due to special market conditions pursuant to RCW 3904280. This is discussion with possible action. And let's see, Mr. Harris, Chief Harris.
Good evening, Mayor Gear, members of council. We're trying to do is store some disaster supplies here on the island. Currently, all of the bedding, cots, things like that are stored off island in Bellingham. There is some food here, but it's not stored in a good spot. Chief Curtis had asked a few weeks ago so we could start looking into purchasing a container. And during his research, he found this one. It's what it is an out of service refrigerated container, which makes it insulated, stainless steel on the inside, and really well fit to our needs. But there's just the one. And so, you know, going to bid doesn't really work. And so we're hoping to pick that up with existing budget funds. We already have the funding within the disaster preparedness section of the fire budget. So no additional funds are necessary. We're just trying to get this particular container. Happy to answer any other questions if you may have.
Chief, two things. What's the cost for the audience to hear, and where would the container be located?
Yeah, the cost is $89.05. And I don't know if that includes shipping and delivery. I don't have that information with me here tonight. I'm going to assume it probably does not. But we're going to locate it on the wastewater treatment plant site. Mr. Buchan, Fred, sorry, has worked with his staff to find a good spot for it. I haven't been there, but I've seen photos and it should fit nicely.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Mr. Walters.
Yeah, this looks fine to me. Kudos for finding a deal. I guess my only question actually is generated by the location of the box. I understand that the wastewater treatment plant is in the inundation zone and some of the new tsunami maps. So does that inform at all where we're putting the box?
I know that there were some discussions there while we were looking at the sites as the new maps were coming out. That is a concern of Chief Curtis. He couldn't be here tonight due to some family issues. But after he looked at it and looked at the realistic possibilities, he was comfortable siting it there. There were some other locations looked at, but nothing else was as convenient.
All right, and I assume that this will get integrated into our emergency operations plans, and we can reevaluate its site as well in the future.
Certainly, absolutely. And that's one nice thing is it is certainly movable if something changes or comes up.
Yeah.
Okay. Any additional questions for Chief Harris? Hey, what is your pleasure, council?
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Miller.
Move to adopt resolution 3039 waiving bid requirements due to special market conditions as authorized in the RCW 3904280.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Miller, a second by Mr. Young. Are there any more discussion? Ms. Hunt, would you take the vote?
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. So at this time, we're going to go into executive session. This is item 6A for potential litigation per RCW 4230110. This is a discussion only item. It could take up to 45 minutes and no action will be taken during that executive session. And after the executive session, the city council meeting will be adjourned. So at this time, council, if you'll go out of your Zoom platform and go into your, the next, I think it's Teams meeting for executive session. And members of the audience, thank you for being with us this evening.